Hello and welcome back to What Is This Weapon? I'm Jonathan and this is, well, it's a Lee Speed rifle, which I should probably explain for those of you who don't know what that means. But it's a Lee Speed rifle with a particular history to it, and it connects back to a video that we did not so long ago about the Thorneycroft. So this is a third pattern Thorneycroft rifle. We've yet to cover this on the channel, but back in 2017, I think it was, Forgotten Weapons covered this version of the Thorneycroft. We then covered the earlier, more bullpup versions of the Thorneycroft bullpup bolt-action 303 rifle in that video. So check that out as well. This is kind of a sequel to that video from the other week. Why am I foregrounding a non-bullpup Thorneycroft? Well, it isn't really a Thorneycroft rifle, but it belonged to James Baird Thorneycroft himself, which is really nice because we have relatively little in the collection with a personal connection, and there's also a technical connection back to his bullpups. Now, last time as I have previously in my article on the Thorneycroft rifles and Thorneycroft to SA80, the book, I'd come to the conclusion that Thorneycroft was more the investor, the patron, and Mowbray Gore Farker, they're both Scotsmen, by the way, was more of the bloke in shed inventor. But he is not on that first patent from 1901 for the Thorneycroft bullpup. So on the face of it, that's James Thorneycroft's own design. We don't know what other input he had at that time. He does not seem to have been a firearms designer per se. I think we can say that. And certainly the second and third pattern Thorneycroft's seems to be more Farker's work. So I didn't go into Thorneycroft's bio in any great detail last time. I think we should do that now. So he was best known, I think, for being a steel magnate in Scotland. He owned the firm of William Baird and Co. Described himself as an iron founder, so the director general of a iron and steel making company, basically. He was president of the National Union of Conservative Associations. He was deputy Lord Lieutenant of the County of Ayrshire. And honorary president of the Glasgow Mocklin Society, which seems to have been set up to celebrate the life and work of Robert Burns. So I guess more of a hobby thing there, but a bit of a bigwig overall, I think we can say. And he was very successful. He owned 2 large houses in the country in Ayrshire, and owned and raced horses as well. So very much a sort of side hustle for him. I think my favourite story about Thorneycroft that really illustrates his status is the fact that he ended up being depicted in a stained glass window in full plate armour. I think it's with the biblical reference about the armour of God. It appears in the window, and that's because he was patron of, or a patron, presumably a prolific patron of that church, and so they honoured him with a window that sort of links back to our arms and armour collection in a weird sort of way as well, although he himself doesn't seem to have been a collector of arms and armour. But he was a shooter, as evidenced by this rifle. So how do we know that this is James Baird Thorneycroft's rifle? Well, as is often helpful, he wrote it on the gun. So we have on the butt plate tang here the indication. So, J.B. Thorneycroft, match rifle, July 1904. So that's, match rifle is a discipline, was and is a rifle discipline. So there's service rifle and there's match rifle. Service rifle is, and was, was the service rifle of the day. So a service rifle for the service rifle competition would be a bog standard, in this case, Lee Enfield. So what colloquially we call the long Lee, not the short magazine Lee Enfield, or the magazine Lee Enfield. Match rifle is where you have some leeway to change your sighting arrangements and move a little bit beyond the standard spec of a military service rifle. And Thorneycroft did that primarily with this, which is his own patent back sight, which is I think it's quite interesting, especially because that back sight gets translated over onto his third pattern of bullpup. It's almost exactly the same. There are differences. We, as ever, will throw up the patent for you so you can see what that looked like. And the patent, the sights on his own match rifle are pretty, almost identical to what's in the patent, with one minor exception, which we'll come back to very shortly. So this is not earth-shattering technology. It's a tangent sight. It describes a tangent when you raise it up to enable you to aim by bringing up, of course, the front sight, in this case, the standard Longley blade. The more you raise the back sight, the more you have to raise the front sight, and that allows you to compensate for the drop of the bullet in very simple terms. So there's a ramp for the slider, and the slider forces the sight ladder or blade up. So at our maximum range, this goes up to 2,000 yards and clicks into place. 2,000 yards would give you sort of archery levels of trajectory, whereas your 200-yard minimum setting is fairly flat shooting. This is not, none of this is remarkable. The sight itself and the what's in the patent, so this pinch adjustment is in there. Not uncommon, that you know, pinching to remove something from a notch to allow it to move, that's not something you can patent in itself. It's the shape of it underneath that was the feature of the patent. So we'll flip it up like that, and you can see that this describes a wedge, and, or rather, this is a negative space, and this piece at the back is a wedge. Why is that? As I wondered before I looked at the patent. So in other words, that this goes all the way up and fills in the gap there. Why does it do that? Well, it's quite a clever system to do with what he calls the wind gauge, and we would call windage adjustment today. And that little screw there that's not in the patent, that's a lockout to stop this from moving left and right, because if I press on that, I can move that all the way over to the right there. So you can adjust for wind. If you've got a prevailing wind in one direction of a certain speed, you can estimate it and push this over by manually. There's no detent for each spot, but you move it over, and by eye, you line up the little nicks in the metal so that you're at your maximum. Well, in this case, you're at your maximum adjustment, because I'm going to show you how this works. By resetting the range to minimum, i.e. moving the slider down, that wedge shape is deflected back to center. So it's an automatic return to center feature. So we'll just do that again so you can hopefully see what's going on. We'll do it the other way up though, so you can easily see what's going on. Drop this down for you. So let's say we've got full-on wind from the side, and we've got full deflection to compensate for that. When we reset our sight to the minimum, it automatically moves the sight to the center. Nice little feature, quality of life feature, if you like. Means you don't have to precisely reset it, and it will mechanically return to zero, effectively. So there's a quirk of this, which is not kind of critical to its operation, but these pinch buttons here, normally those would be solid steel, they'd be checkered or something. In Thorneycroft's design, they are these white domes, and the patent shows a dome shape, but doesn't specify examples of what you would use for this material. Why would it? But invariably, with one exception, where they look to have been one's been replaced, the other one hasn't been, and they're wood. One is wood, but looks very crude. All of the others have these white bumps as their operation. In fact, some of them are actually hatched, checkered. Now, I thought originally that these were organic. I thought they were bone or something of that nature, maybe horn. As far as I can tell from the damage that's evident on some of them, they're an early polymer, maybe a casein-based ones derived from milk, or celluloid-based. One of those two early plastics, is my assessment of it. But it's very hard to tell without doing some sort of destructive testing. And there's nothing written down about this, at least nothing that survives. While I've got this one up, this third pattern Thorneycroft bullpup with his Thorneycroft patent sight on it, same system, but the set screw, which needs it's a very fine notch in that screw head. It's needs like a gun maker's screwdriver to adjust it. Not really a problem, but not something you want to do in a hurry. He's moved later, so 1906, to a sliding catch to lock it out. So then, with that in place, it doesn't move. Well, it won't move with that in the way. With that in place, it doesn't move, and then you pop up your catch, and you can move this. This is actually less stiff. Move that left and right, and then again, it will be returned to 0 with the slider. There's also, on both of them, detail elevation adjustment by means of a tiny little thumb wheel on the bottom here on both of these, and it moves that aperture up and down. So on minimum it's flush, and on maximum it sticks up by about 4 mil, something like that. So your sort of gross adjustments are done on the slider, and then any detailed adjustments, or zeroing for that matter, is going to be done with that little wheel, and that's represented in the patent as well. Now, the barrel that the sight sits on, I think, is worthy of mention. So we have on here markings for Webley and Scott, got nicely made traditional engraved markings for the famous Webley and Scott company, running down the barrel. And on the what's called the Knox form, after Henry Knock, who came up with this hexagonal breech form, is the winged bullet W&S on there as well. Now, it appears, as far as I know, Webley did not make complete Lee Speed rifles, but they did make barrels. And Webley and Scott built at least some, probably all, of Thorneycroft's prototype bullpups as well. In case you're wondering what the heck a Lee Speed even is, it kind of fits with the service rifle, match rifle thing. It's the commercial form of the Lee Enfield rifle, or carbine. Carbines exist as well. Lee and Speed are the patent holders. So James Paris Lee, Canadian, who invented the action, and the Speed bit is Joseph J. Speed, who was a senior manager at the Royal Small Arms Factory at Enfield, who did all of the refining, or a lot of, held patents himself on the refinements that went into the British Lee Metford Lee Enfield series of rifles, hence Lee Speed. And so all of these commercial versions of the military rifle are marked Lee Speed patents, which on this one, well, typically, is on the wrist there. So Lee Speed patents, and then a serial number. And this one has a Webley barrel, and it has Thorneycroft patent sights, and those are contemporary with this dedication here, or this inscription here, 1904. At an unknown later date, somebody fitted scope mounts quite badly, I would say. They've damaged the bluing of the original weapon. There are bright marks, there are tool marks, witness marks all over this dovetail here, and there's this peg at the back. So roughly contemporary with this period, but presumably done some years later, maybe by the subsequent owner, maybe by Thorneycroft himself later on, we don't know, but I'd be surprised. I think he would have, well, for one thing, match rifle rules did not allow for optical sights, so this was definitely not when he was using it as a match rifle. This is from later on. Still historic, still interesting, but we don't really know who did it. Well, we don't know who did it, and we don't really know the type of scope beyond it being similar to some of the period mounts that exist. I can't identify a scope that fits these mounts. If you have any idea, do let us know. This is a straight through dovetail here, and you have this post at the back for a hook type mount on the rear of the scope. And literally the last thing I noticed about this second time I seriously looked at it, is a little bit of decoration, which I think is interesting. So on the bottom of the magazine, now this may be where someone has replaced the magazine and it's come with decoration, but we have quite nice, subtle, incised or graved decoration on the bottom of the magazine. There's no other decoration on this thing at all. So is that a replacement magazine somebody else dropped on from a more decorated weapon than this? Or is that Thorneycroft's own little subtle personal bit of decoration to his match rifle that he knows is there and he appreciates, but very few people would ever see? Don't know, but it's fun to speculate, and it's nice to have the personal rifle belonging to someone who, for me at least, is quite significant in the history of British rifles, because I do like the bullpups. Thanks for watching, everyone. Remember, as always, the YouTube things, liking, subscribing, all that stuff. Now, you also might want to be aware of a new publication written by yours truly. It's a follow-up to our First World War introduction book from a few years ago. We've got around to doing the Second World War now. Hopefully of interest to you guys. We actually have 3 different bundles, apparently, I'm told, by our shop colleagues that you might want to check out, other than just the book on its own. So please look out for that. That is, I think, at the printers as we speak. Pre-orders are being taken now. At the time of recording, the first 100 will be, well, the first 100 will be signed, no matter what happens. But if you get in there really quickly, you might snag one of those. We also, this summer, have our new blockbuster exhibition, Gladiators. Keep an eye out for the pre-orders for the tickets for that on the website, and you'll see it on social media as well. But whatever you do, join us here again on What's This Weapon next week.